How is everybody doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Book Week is continuing to roll right along, and I have another great book review for everybody today. Today, we're going to be talking about the book Millionaire, which is basically the biography of John Law, who is considered by many to be the father of modern economics, going back to the 17th century. So Law was involved in what they called at the time a scheme to basically reinvent some of the economic dealings in France. He created what is now known as the first boom and bust cycle from 1716 to 1720 in France. And it was just an absolutely wild story. And he was a wild character. I liken it to if you ever saw the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. So I would liken this is basically like The Wolf of Wall Street, but for the 17th century. So it's a pretty amazing story. So here we're looking at, so the book that we're talking about today is called Millionaire. So this is the Philanderer, gambler, and duelist who invented modern finance. And we're going to run through here. So the author is Janet Gleeson. This book was written in 1999. The publisher was Bantam Press. It's approximately 278 pages, and it is the biography of John Law, a Scottish financial genius who revolutionized France's economy in the early 18th century. So we have here on the left, here's a picture of John Law. He was a rather tall gentleman, well over 6 foot, skinny for the most part, especially younger in his life. So he, back in those days, he was like a giant compared to most guys. So he obviously stood out very easily in a crowd. And John Law he was born in 1671 and he died in 1729. And this book basically explores Law's rise from gambler and fugitive to a powerful financier, his creation of the Mississippi Company, and the infamous Mississippi Bubble. He was charming, flawed, and visionary. And this combines biography, economic history, and cultural analysis of French Regency period. So what was John Law's early life? So he was born in 1671 in Edinburgh to a goldsmith family. So Law was mathematically gifted and drawn to gambling. John Law, most of his family members were like ministers at churches. And then his father, who was William Law, his father was a goldsmith, also known in those days as a money dealer. It's basically, he was like a modern day banker at that time. So like the goldsmith, you would go to the goldsmith, you deposit your gold with them or your silver with them, and then they would hold on to it and they would either write you out banknotes or they would, lend you money and things like that. Based on that, they would also do other things. They would exchange foreign currency, just like I said, just hold money for people, construct different types of transactions. And so John learned a lot about money, and he learned about goldsmithing and money dealing from his father at a very young age. Unfortunately, I think when he was about 12, his father passed away. And then it was a lot of stuff was left to John and his brother and his mom, and they tried to kind of figure out the estate, but it was really a mess, and it took him a long time. And so John basically, and John was always self-professed. He was very lazy. Like he didn't like to work, so he didn't go to university in those days, as mathematically gifted as he was. But what he did was he studied everything. Like he got a lot of the books and the letters and papers and things that were written at the time by a lot of intellectuals, people from high society, and he just absolutely just devoured a lot of this stuff. And because of his mathematics, he's just incredibly a brilliant gentleman. But he also, being gifted at mathematics, also he fell in love with gambling, and that's what leaves us. So young John moves to London. He lived as a dandy, and he killed a man in a 1694 duel, leading to imprisonment and escape to Europe. So this is where the story gets wild. So, John's 23 years old. He's living it up in London. He's become a very popular guy. He makes his money gambling. He's become known as a very, very good gambler. But he's also a womanizer, and he has a lot of what they call amours, girlfriends. So he's living in a house, and he gets in a dispute with another guy, another gentleman of not noble birth, but a very wealthy young guy of the same age, around 23 years old. But this guy is very aristocratic, and he's much more popular than John, and he's there. And so they obviously get into a fight over women, undoubtedly. It doesn't explicitly say that in the book, but you could kind of, imagine that this is what, two young guys, going at, on the rise, living it up in downtown London. And so they go at it. So then they have this duel. John Law kills him so it's a duel with swords. John Law basically stabs him with the sword, kills him. And then John Law gets thrown in jail. Now, when John Law goes to jail, obviously this popular, well-to-do guy's got a lot of, they both had very friends in high places, so to speak. But I think the guy that he killed had more so. So John Law basically gets sentenced to death, and then he ends up finding a way to escape from prison. So then he is exiled from Britain, because basically he refuses to come back, because if he comes back, he gets hung. So he refuses to come back. So he kind of goes into exile, and now he's off, kind of running around Europe. And now he really steps up his gambling game, so to speak. And he really becomes this very accomplished gambler. But he's very charismatic, and people really like him. People love being around him. And so he begins to develop this kind of reputation and larger than life personality. So again, he amasses wealth through gambling, and he studied finance, developing innovative economic theories. Now, and here's kind of interesting. So this is actually a note here from, this is a French bank note here, I believe. So what were some of Law's financial innovations? So basically, he proposed a bank issuing paper money backed by land. This ultimately got rejected by England's Queen Anne. In 1716, he convinced France's bank. So France is on the verge of bankruptcy here, right? So he comes in and he convinced the Regency to adopt his ideas, founding the Banque Royale. Now, it's important to note, what was the Regency? So the King of France at the time was a young boy. He wasn't ready to take over. So you have this regent who's in control and in command of everything until he's basically of age that he can assume the crown of France. So that's why they call it the Regency. So then he created the Mississippi Company in 1717, selling shares tied to Louisiana trade, sparking massive wealth and the term millionaire. So Law had visionary ideas like paper currency and credit, which were radical for the time. Now, what was the Mississippi bubble here? I have a chart here on the right-hand side kind of showing how it went up and crashed back down. So basically, the Mississippi bubble. So Law's system fueled a speculative frenzy in Paris with share prices soaring and wealth democratized. Even servants became rich, basically. Overprinting of money and exaggerated claims about Louisiana led to the 1720 crash known as the Mississippi Bubble. Markets collapsed, Law was vilified, and his paper money system was abandoned. So what are some of the strengths of the book? So it's got an engaging narrative. So Gleeson writes with vivid detail, making complex financial concepts accessible. Historical context, it richly depicts the 18th century French society, from opulent courts to frenzied markets. It's a very balanced portrayal. Presents Law as both innovative and flawed, avoiding hagiography. What are some of the weaknesses of the book? Well, economic details are a little sketchy. Some readers find explanation of Law's money supply management unconvincing or oversimplified. That was exactly my problem with the book. When I got to the end, I was like, man, I really would have liked more in-depth explanation on some of, again, the money supply management and just how he did some of the things that he did. Ambiguous conclusion. So Gleeson leaves Law's motives enigmatic, which may frustrate readers seeking clarity. Yes, I would agree with that too. Assumes some knowledge of French history, potentially alienating newcomers. Yeah, you do need to understand a little bit about the period in terms of finance, politics, what was going on there in Europe, is particularly a lot of the battles between France and England there. While the book is engaging, it may not satisfy readers wanting deeper economic analysis. Yes, I would concur with that. So themes and relevance. So it explores the allure and danger of speculation, resonating with modern financial crises, examines the nature of money and trust in financial systems still relevant in debates over fiat currency and crypto. Law's story reflects human nature, greed, ambition, and the pursuit of wealth unchanged across centuries. And there's a quote, Law's was the first stock market boom, and we still haven't worked out how to prevent the inevitable collapse. So I like that. So the conclusion and the recommendation. This was a famous painting right here. Again, if you Google this or whatever, it's very interesting. So basically you've got guys basically pooping paper. So basically, in other words, that's what the paper was written on. So it's kind of like again, it's kind of like a fraudulent scheme here. You have guys on the one side here, printing paper, pushing it out, and then you've got the people on the outside all fighting to get behind the big curtain here, to get in on the action, whatever. And so it's a humorous but also a highly enlightening painting for that period of time. So, but the book is captive. It has a captivating blend of biography and economic history, bringing John Law's dramatic life story, ideal for readers interested in finance, history, or tales of ambition and downfall, less suited for those seeking technical economic analysis. Read it for its storytelling and historical insight, but supplement with other sources for deeper financial details. So pick up Millionaire to discover the man who coined the term and the chaos that followed. So despite the book being fairly light on economic details, I would tell you I absolutely love the book. It is an incredible period piece. It puts you in the moment of France back then in that time period and really paints a very vivid detail of what it was like to be there. John Law's life is crazy. Like I said from the beginning, he grows up basically the son of a banker, but then his father dies. He moves to London. He's this brilliant kid, but yet he gravitates toward banking and womanizing and just kind of living it up, living life by the moment. He gets, like I said, he has this duel, gets convicted of murdering this gentleman, escapes, gets out, becomes exiled, but then he travels all over Europe. And he is constantly writing letters back to England, trying to get a pardon. And at the same time, he's always, he's writing all these heads of states and basically saying, hey, I've got this. And it's interesting. Back in those days, they called them schemes. We would never use that word today because obviously of fraud that gets associated with it. But back then they were schemes. Oh, I've got this economic scheme for you. I got this scheme for you. And, and everybody ignores him. Everybody's ignoring. And then finally, he comes to France, and France is desperate. And he's got this, great reputation in France. People love him there. So they give him a shot and they say, hey, let's see what he can do. And then he starts doing it. He creates the Bank Royale and then Mississippi Company. And all these things are like, it's like a classic case of like everything that he touches turns to gold. And it turns to gold until it doesn't, because there was, again, it's just, and you get the, and it's like any boom and bust cycle. You get the, it starts off and then you have the mania phase, and then everybody's got to get in on it because everybody's, making so much money, at least on paper. But then you start looking at the reality of the situation. Where are the profits? What's going on? What's happening? And it just didn't, like I said, nothing panned out the way that they thought it would. So, but again, a great book, great period. I think John Law is one of the most craziest characters you will ever see in the world of finance, and definitely one of the most entertaining. So like I said, so I highly recommend the book. Check it out sometime if you have a chance. But with that, I will wrap this episode up by saying, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please be sure to leave your comments down below, as I always love getting back to everybody. And as always, please check out some of the other content on the channel. I hope everyone has a great day out there, and I will see everyone again real soon. Thanks a lot.